Shana Tova. In my neighborhood, we have a pharmacy called St. Paul Corner Drug. It's a real old-fashioned neighborhood drugstore. It even has an ice cream fountain. The owner, John, lives in the neighborhood, and a few years ago, he opened up in the middle of the night for us to get my daughter some meds she needed. On the night of the riots after the George Floyd killing, John's 20-year-old daughter was minding the store while John raced out for supplies to board up the windows. She was in the upstairs office when she saw through the window that a group of would-be rioters had gathered out front. She went downstairs, and she told them that this is a family-owned neighborhood shop. Please don't hurt us and all the people that need their medications. True story, and one that beautifully demonstrates courage and faith, the two character traits Rabbi Spilker has spoken about in his sermons on these holy days. John's daughter, in a moment of crisis, had the courage to face the would-be rioters and the faith that they would respond with compassion for her store and its customers. Courage, faith, and compassion. You may or may not have noticed that these virtues headlined our High Holiday Bulletin this year, and for good reason. We desperately need them in these troubled times. Courage and faith help us confront the challenges we face so that they don't defeat us. Compassion, I think, serves a different function. Compassion enables us to help others confront these same challenges and helps us when courage and faith aren't quite enough. When Moses was on Mount Sinai collecting the Ten Commandments, he takes a little longer than the Israelites expect, and they have a crisis of both courage and faith. Feeling abandoned and afraid, the Israelites build the golden calf, which in turn makes God feel abandoned and probably afraid. This leads to disaster, as we know. There's death and destruction, and certainly even more fear and despair. So Moses goes back up the mountain to plead with God to forgive the Israelites. Ultimately, God relents and agrees to forgive the Israelites, exclaiming, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun. I am Adonai, a compassionate and gracious God. This verse is recited before the open ark only on the holiest days of the year. It is one of the last prayers we will say during Ne'ilah this afternoon. One last request for forgiveness before the closing of the gates. In the Talmud, Rabbi Yochanan explains why. God said to Moses, every time that Israel sins, do before me this litany, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, and I will forgive them. It seems Rabbi Yochanan is suggesting that when we've sinned, reciting this verse will remind God to be compassionate with us. But listen carefully to the word. Every time that Israel sins, they should do this litany before me, and I will forgive them. It doesn't say we should recite the prayer, but that we should do it. And maybe we do need to remind God to be compassionate, but not with words. We have to enact these divine qualities in our lives. We have to do them, to manifest them, to become them, and not just say them. In the words of Frederick Douglass, we have to pray with our feet. If we want God to act like God, that is, to be compassionate, first we have to act like God by setting an example of compassion. So how's this for a radical theological paradox? Living in the image of God is really role modeling for God. Whether God is our role model or the other way around begs the question, what does compassion really ask of us? You know that I like words, so I started looking into the meaning and background of compassion, which led me down a rabbit hole of apparent synonyms like sympathy, empathy, and pity. What I found is there is some agreement that there's a hierarchy of responses when we encounter suffering. Pity says, I see your pain. Sympathy says, I understand your pain. Empathy says, I feel your pain. Compassion says, I am with you in your pain and I will help. Which is all really interesting, and I agree with it, but all these English words stem from Latin and Greek, and roots meaning feelings and suffering. But the compassion I am interested in stems from Hebrew and has a very different source. Compassion in Hebrew is rachamim. Rachamim is a plural form of the word rechem, meaning womb. I want to explore for a moment this connection between rechem, womb, and rachamim, compassion. I ask your forgiveness if the image raises anything uncomfortable or painful for any reason. Please reach out to me later if it does. On the connection between rechem and rachamim, our sages say that compassion is like a mother's love for her child. But I think this is completely missing the point. First, rechem is womb, not mother. The womb does not love. The womb sustains and protects the unborn baby simply because that is what it does. Also, the womb connects the baby to the mother in a most intimate way. Perhaps the most intimate connection two separate beings can have with each other. But the relationship is not symbiotic. The womb gives, the baby receives. From this perspective, then, rachamim, or being womb-like, means being connected to another human being in an intimate, sustaining way, without expectation of anything in return. Rachamim is not a feeling like sympathy or empathy or even love. It is a deep connection to another human being that moves us to act in ways that are sustaining to that person. It's an expression of shared humanity. Empathy and sympathy are important, of course, and they can lead to compassion. But at the end of the day, feelings themselves do not have an impact unless they move us to do something. And feelings, frankly, can be fickle, and we can't always control them. My feeling of anger is likely to overtake my feeling of sympathy or empathy and cause me to withdraw or lash out. But compassion can coexist positively with anger and move me to tshuva, return, healing the breach in a relationship, or to tikkun, repair, addressing the ills in society. Rachamim, compassion, is not a feeling, it is a choice. It is the choice to acknowledge our shared humanity no matter how I feel about you. Compassion is choosing to acknowledge that we are in this together, whether we like it or not. And unlike feelings, compassion is within our ability to control. Even more, it is our mandate. We're commanded in Deuteronomy to walk in God's ways, which is interpreted by our sages as God is compassionate, so you must be compassionate. As God clothed the naked, visited the sick, comforted the mourners, buried the dead, so must you. Samuel Luzzatto, one of the great Jewish thinkers of the 19th century, taught, compassion constitutes the basis of love, kindness, and righteousness. It is the medium by which we all might learn to live in peace. It's a grand statement. Compassion is the medium by which we all might learn to live in peace. But if you think about it, it might well be. Imagine what it would be like if everybody was really able to fully appreciate that we're all in this together. If everybody committed to treating others as if their humanity really mattered, irrespective of how we feel about one another. If we all made the choice to protect and sustain each other simply because we are human and that's what we do. This afternoon, as Ne'ilah approaches, we will recite Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, the verse that is supposed to inspire God's compassion on us. The question is, will we just recite it or will we live it? Will we all wear our masks and physically distance to protect the people around us simply because they are human? Will we all reduce, reuse, and recycle to sustain our planet simply because we all live here? Will we work to make Black lives and the lives of all people of color matter because for too long we didn't? Will we all vote and do our part to make every vote count because we are all human? If individuals and communities, religions, cultures, and nations all engaged with each other from a starting point of shared humanity, acting with compassion, then perhaps God would take our cue and forgive us for getting ourselves into this situation in the first place. And so I pray. El Malei Rachamim, God full of compassion, may our deeds and our lives be models of rachamim, womb-likeness. May we act always in ways that are sustaining to others and to ourselves, cognizant of our shared humanity, inspired by our shared divinity. And may this, in turn, move God to be compassionate with us.